It was time for another rescue mission on Dreamlight Valley. I unlocked another door, and on the other side, I discovered the Aladdin realm. I arrived in Agrabah, where Aladdin and Jasmine were facing some unusual problems. Agrabah was being attacked by sandstorms, conjured up by dark magic. The sandstorms were threatening to destroy the whole town, and so I decided to help them stop it. The biggest sandstorm was the biggest problem. Right in the middle of the town, I met Jasmine, who told me that even Carpet tried to get in there and stop the storm, but he was caught up and was trapped inside. In order to save the town, Carpet, and Jasmine, I had to find Aladdin, who was on the other side of town. After helping Jasmine rebuild the town stalls, my next objective was rescuing Carpet. Aladdin had an idea to help stop the storm by containing it in a magic lamp. Using the remnants of his 3 wishes, we were able to construct a genie's lamp and sucked in the entire storm, saving Carpet and the town. Everyone was delighted to have this problem solved, and after some convincing, I invited Carpet, Jasmine, and Aladdin back to the valley. Once all 3 of them, including Carpet, came back to the valley, I began to think about what they can do to better the valley. Aladdin wanted to test out the security systems in Scrooge's store. Scrooge was happy to comply, seeing how Aladdin was an expert thief. After that, Aladdin wanted to thank me for my help in bringing him back to the valley, and he wanted to reward me with my own magic carpet. With Minnie's help, we were able to create our own magic carpet, which I now use to fly across the valley. After all that, Aladdin finally decided what he wanted to do on Dreamlight Valley. Instead of taking, he would give. He wanted to open up his own stall for selling precious gems. Gems that were pretty tricky to find in the valley. Every one of the other stall owners wanted to help him out, and thus Aladdin was the newest stall vendor on Dreamlight Valley. Jasmine, on the other hand, had some other quests in mind. A mysterious flower chest had appeared in Aladdin and Jasmine's palace. Inside was a strange book that was having some pretty unusual effects on the valley, causing wishes to come true, regardless of whether they meant it or not. It was pretty tricky, but eventually we stopped the book's magic and everything went back to normal. But Agrabah was not the only new place available to me. It soon came to my attention that another island was floating ethereally out there. I used my magic and brought it to the Powderpelago. Once it was settled, I set off to explore the Storybook Vale. A strange land where stories came to life right off the page. To my surprise, the Storybook Vale already had its rulers. Maleficent, the mistress of all evil, and Hades, the god of the underworld. The pair of them had ruled Storybook Vale for years, but their differences ultimately led to a divide in the island. The two sides were at war with each other, creating genuine rifts in the land. This divide also created ink. Dark, toxic ink that was rising up from the books, threatening to erase anyone and anything who got close. Thanks to my magic, I was able to clear away some of the ink, and in doing so, I met up with a fellow Scot, Princess Merida of Clan Dunbroch. She explained to me that her and a few others were trapped in the very middle section of the island, the Bind, separating both sides. The Bind was the only safe place we could stay, outside the Library of Lore. Within this massive library, I was introduced to the Lore Keeper, an enchanted book who saw over all the stories in the library. However, due to the divide between Maleficent and Hades, her pages were coming loose, springing to life in the form of snippets, paper creatures made out of her pages. Without her pages, the Lore Keeper wouldn't be able to hold off the toxic ink that was taking over the valley. I decided to help her out in recapturing the snippets and giving her pages back. The snippets were very tricky to catch, but luckily for me, I had a new tool to help me out: the magic net. With this net, I was able to capture some of the bird snippets in the library. After bringing the pages back to the Lore Keeper, she updated me on the situation between Maleficent and Hades. In order to help bring balance back to the storybook Vale, I decided to stop the feud between Maleficent and Hades in hopes of restoring peace. In order to find Maleficent, I decided to explore the very area she was said to inhabit, the Ever After, the site of the island where all written fairy tales are said to manifest. Me and Merida explored the area, finding no sign of life outside of the cute dragons, owls, and frog snippets that were in the area. The only unusual thing we found were wolf tracks, evidence of a big bad wolf. Curious as to who this big bad wolf was, we followed it into a cave where Maleficent had set up pocket dimensions. Within these castle walls, the big bad wolf made himself known, but refused to show his face. I became suspicious, and very soon, this image of the wolf of the wilds turned out to be nothing but a hoax. The real person behind these doors was Flynn Rider. Flynn told me that Maleficent had put him under her spell to try and find who she called the Lost Princess, Aurora. Regardless of what happened in the past, I forgave Flynn for what was happening with him. A giant beanstalk began growing up to Maleficent's castle in the sky. The more we explored, the more this beanstalk grew, until eventually I could reach Maleficent's castle. But I would have to wait first, as my next stop was very crucial. My next stop was Mythopia, the land that Hades ruled over, where legends and heroes were forged. This land was dominated by demons and Pegasi, and it was here that I discovered another pocket dimension, where Hades was having some trouble of his own. Hades was a bit more cooperative than Maleficent seemed to be, as he just wanted to get back to Mount Olympus, where he wanted to rule. After helping him complete his trials, I was able to help him escape from this pocket dimension, where the gateways to Mount Olympus began to open up. Just like in the Ever After, the more we explored, the more the pathway seemed to clear, until eventually, the gates to Mount Olympus were finally opened. Now that Hades had his kingdom back, he decided to celebrate, in his own way. But now was no time to celebrate. Flynn was feeling deeply distressed. He was deeply troubled by what Maleficent wanted to do with him. The fact that he was under her control to find Aurora for Maleficent was really eating at him. However, thanks to help from some of my friends, and after reuniting him with Rapunzel, he was soon feeling like his old jolly self again. With all that done, there was just one other person I needed to speak to. Maleficent. She awaited me in her castle. With Hades unable to back down, she wasn't able to back down either. But ultimately, I calmed her down and brought her and Hades to the Library of Lore to try and sort out their differences. To my surprise, Maleficent was surprisingly calm. She was actually willing to put aside their differences and stop the divide between the Storybook Vale. And they did. Hades and Maleficent's feud was over, but Maleficent seemed a little too happy with the outcome. Maleficent had just disappeared. Me, Hades, and the Lore Keeper tried to find her, but she had just vanished without a trace. I was concerned for what she had planned, but for now, all I can do was sit back and think. I evacuated everyone off the Storybook Vale back to Dreamlight Valley. There, Flynn and Merida began asking around the other residents to see if they could figure out what was going on. I don't know where Maleficent went, but all I do know is that when she comes back, we'll be ready for her.